candidates. So we'll have a little back and forth between them to see how they want to interact with each other. And then we're going to go to individual questions, where each candidate will receive individual questions specific to them. So instead of the broad categories, there'll be specific questions for both candidates. And then we'll have closings, 2-minute closing statement. So we will have, if you can hold up our cards, we will have yellow cards with the yellow card will show 15 seconds left in that round, and then we will have a red card which will show that you're done. So just, show everyone can see it. And please, out of time, respect our audience, equal time, and please follow this structure. Here she is. Hello, Alderman Smith. So we are about to begin. We will, once you get set up there, give it a minute there. We will begin. We're going to go. We're going to go in an alternating fashion, and we're going to start tonight's opening statement with Michelle Smith. And once you're ready, Alderman Smith, let me know. And just so you know, both candidates, you have water under the podium if you need it. So both candidates were briefed on the structure and format, so they are aware. So everything I just told you, they've been aware for a few days. So Michelle, Alderman Smith, whenever you get set up and ready, we're going to start with your opening statement. The opening statement will have as a theme. The theme we gave the candidates is why do you want to be our alderman and what unique qualities and qualifications you have for the job. So 60 seconds each candidate, and we'll start with Alderman Smith.
Well, thank you very much. Can you hear it? Are we on? Okay, now you start. My career as a federal prosecutor really inspired me to run for alderman, for cleaning up government and making change. And this election is really all about ending waste and corruption in our city, and not just talking about it, but really working for reform, as I have for my entire career. Chicago's on the brink of change because reformers like me have risked everything to challenge entrenched power. But this is the time to talk about the comparison between your candidates. And I have to ask, what has my opponent done for reform in the 4 years that he's lived? Mr. Lindblom trumpets his pension deal with the unions. What he doesn't say is that the same unions sued over that agreement when the ink was dry, and instead of running over at a tough problem, Mr. Lindblom got run over. And Chicago was forced to raise property taxes by operation of state law. And Lincoln Yards is pretty much the biggest issue facing us right now. And what has Mr. Lindblom done to run at that problem?
Okay, time.
Thank you. I look forward to speaking to you further.
Okay, Derek, same question.
Sure. I guess I see where this is going. Hi, I'm Derek. I live in here with my wife and our 2-year-old son, just a bit of that way. I love this community. I'm running because this community has meant a lot to me in my life. This is actually the community I moved to years ago, quite more than 4 years ago, when I lived here right after school, when I moved home to Chicago. It's a community I met my wife in. It's a community we moved out of. We couldn't afford a house here, afforded a down payment, saved up, moved back to, and bought our house. It's where we have our selling. We're about to send it to the local public school. I'm running because we have a real chance to make this community even better and fight the problems that are really attacking our city. We can do so much more with constituent services, making sure our services are more accountable to you, making sure we modernize our alderman's office, and also use the old school traditions like ward night to make it more open. And then we can fight the biggest problems our city has: safety, rising property taxes because we're not solving the city's financial problems, and then of course, getting a real reform in city council, including eliminating alderman side jobs. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk to you about the positive message of why I'm running, and I'm looking forward to tonight.
Okay, thank you both. We'll have one more candidate experience question, and this will go to Derek as we're alternating. Please outline your 43rd Ward Aldermanic mission and vision statement for the next 4 years. And you have 60 seconds.
Sure. I think I'll give you a quick summary. 60 seconds is a lot of time. But it starts with, what can we do locally? And for me, there's 2 major imperatives locally. Number 1 is you have an alderman's office that when you call in, keeps track of your calls, gets back to you, and tells you how long it's going to fix your problem, how long it takes to fix your problem. Then it's also about getting at the issues that really hurt our community, things like vacant storefronts, and making real changes. But But then it's also about the city as a whole, getting at the safety issues that plague the city and increasingly our community, making a real difference on taxes and making a real difference on ethics. I think if you do all these things together, you can be a great alderman at both parts of your job. Both the part locally, where you deliver wonderful services and you really engage with the community, and then the part where you're a legislator in a legislature that covers more people than 15 different states. I think if you really focus on both part of your jobs, you do everything great and work really hard at it and focus full time on it, you can make a real difference for this community. And that's what I care about, and that's what I'm excited about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm continuing and keeping going. I'm really interested. Our vision for our next term is to finish the work we've done at revitalizing our commercial corridors, having Lincoln Avenue come back to life, have Clark Street come back to life with wayfinding and trying to bring an entertainment, trying to bring a cultural attraction there, a theater, with increasing the work we've done on public safety, which we're turning around, and then working on our really big issues, making sure that our community stays what it has been for so many years in the face of this enormous amount of development that is now coming to our ward. Making sure that we are buffered from the gigantic development that's planned at the North Branch, and continue fighting for those things and government ethics that I've been doing for so many years.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the category questions now. And in this round, we're going to have multiple questions in a variety of categories. And again, these primarily were taken from not only our committee, but also from the polling that the community did. There'll be a variety of topics, and I'll kind of outline the topics ahead of talking about asking the questions. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer, and then the second candidate will have 90-second follow-up. And at my discretion, I have some follow-up questions if needed. So we're going to start with Alderman Smith on a development, zoning, and land use issue question. And the order of these questions primarily were the priority taken from the survey as well in terms of importance from that survey. So the question is, with regards to Lincoln Yards, what specific options do we have at this point to assure some or all of our most critical concerns are met now that the City Council has approved the proposal?
Well, first of all, I will say this, it's never over. We are having a new mayor coming into place who has voiced very strong concern about this development. And I believe whether or not the tip is passed, that we can still make changes afterwards. There's legal opportunities to do that, but as well, we are going to continue staying organized as a community as we have been to make sure that our needs are met on transportation, on open space, on buffering our development, and on making sure that our taxpayer dollars, which will be at risk with $1 billion being given away to a developer, that's a huge risk to our own property taxes. And many people in this board agree that this is just not the right thing to do. And I've led on this issue, and we are not going to quit. We can get the park we want. We can get the buffer about the development if we stay united as a community. Now, my opponent, unfortunately, has just accepted $10,000 from Sterling May's lawyers. So we know where he stands because he has never taken a stand on this issue in the entire 4 years that he has lived here. He's not spoken at a meeting. He hasn't written a letter to the editor. We want to know what he's going to do about that critical issue.
Okay, thank you. Derek?
So I actually have no idea what she's talking about. And you know how it can be helpful is to actually handed out pieces of paper that say where I stand on this issue, and you can look at it. It's also every debate we've had, every open forum we've had, I've talked about this. The difference is I have different priorities on this issue. My priorities are transportation, infrastructure, and congestion. Those are the things I think are the real issues with the Lincoln Yards development and why I wasn't there with it. My problem with that development is we are going to get sandwiched between the development and the lake. We're not going to be able to get to the highway. We're going to be stuck in traffic. And if we don't fix those infrastructure needs, we're going to be in real trouble. I think Alderman Smith's policy on this issue failed. The development passed, and now we're in a situation where we're going to have to deal with the development, and we have no guarantees that we need on infrastructure. We don't have a park. We don't even know what's going to happen to our schools, which are already overcrowded. I think this is a point Leslie Fox and others have made during the earlier debates that I think is incredibly important. So our community has lost that. We weren't at the table when we got served for dinner. So I think what we need to do now is we need to, like Jim's question, double down and get back to that table and negotiate on infrastructure. Before anyone passes any sort of tip, let's make sure we know exactly what's in it. Let's make sure we're actually doubling down on where we're getting this infrastructure funding to make a real difference. Because if we don't fix our highways, if we don't fix our ability to get to the highway, then we're never going to be in a situation where we can make a difference for you in your daily life. I think there's going to be a lot of smear accusations thrown into this debate, and I encourage you to ignore the old Chicago way and look to what we can make a difference in the future.
Okay, I'm going to exercise my moderator discretion and ask a quick follow-up. If it does pass, if the TIF does pass next month, in 15 seconds, can you say what can we do besides legal recourse? Starting with Alderman Smith. Give one example.
Well, I know that the person who I hope to be our new mayor would like to re-examine it. And just like when new presidents take office, they introduce measures that go against what was done in previous administrations, I think we'll introduce a measure to revoke it. But there are many things that can happen between now and then. Many things
Right.
can happen.
Okay, thank you. Just, Derek.
I think you're being sold a bill of goods. I think what we need to do is double down on making sure we have enough infrastructure that our community isn't paralyzed against the lake. I think we need to double down on making sure our highway entrances and exits and roads actually work. I think that's the biggest difference.
Double down meaning?
Meaning we want to make sure that infrastructure investment is focused on this specific area, and that we get our share of those dollars.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to respond to that.
Okay, please.
Which is, so what Derek's talking about is actually the logic used by Sterling Bay. A TIF is supposed to exist when you say, but for this development, you need the TIF, but for, this development would not exist but for this development. The argument that the proponents of Sterling, of Lincoln Yard say is, well, but for our development, you'll never get your bridge. So I think we're being ransomed in an area where for years we have focused on capital bills, or grants, or federal grants. We have congressmen.
Okay,
And so that's where I think the falsity of that argument is at.
thank you.
Can I respond to this?
I don't think it'll go on all night.
That's probably the first thing that's
That's great.
Okay, thank you both. I know it's a hot topic, I just wanted to dig a little deeper. Can you give, for Derek, can you give us examples of developments in the 43rd Ward that represent good developments that have had a positive impact on the community, as well as an example of bad development that have had a negative impact on the community? Just so we can get some insights as to what you consider good, successful, and poorly developed bad.
That's a great question. I'll give you a bad example and a good example. Start with the good. I actually think there's a smaller development called Duet, I believe is the name, where it's about 3 to 4 stories. It's low-rise density. It's on, I think it's the corner, I want to say Alt Gelb and Lincoln, but it's right there and walk by it a lot. And I think it's a development where you put in a place where different folks can live in our community. It doesn't have to be folks who afford a single-family home. It can be younger families. And it puts a great area for them to move into our community. I'll give you an example of what I think was bad. And that's the Children's Memorial Development. And I'll tell you why. We have so many vacant storefronts, and we added so much more retail. We added another development that went through what I call, theater, where we said, is there community input? And we were given none. We went through another development process where people weren't listened to. And I think when that happens, you don't get the development better. And instead, we have huge towers that don't fit in with our community, right in the center of our community, causing incredible traffic congestion issues. Instead, I think we could have built a more thoughtful development that had more community input. And I think you can see that difference between that low-rise density and that out-of-place development that has way too much retail in a time where we can't even feel the retail we already have.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Smith?
Well, I'm not sure we're going to relitigate that tonight, but I will say that reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of how retail works. And how our community was denuded when Children's left. Everyone remembers that after Children's left, we had a 33% vacancy rate. And with the coming of that development, the places are filling up. New restaurants and stores are coming in every day. And that's because we lacked a little town center. We lacked a crossroads. That was always our vision for it, and we negotiated in the way that the 43rd Ward does. We had arguments, we had tough negotiations, and we significantly downsized that development. I was encouraged by my predecessor, who supports Mr. Lindblom, to approve that development at 28 stories. And I said, no, we are going to work with our community and fight it out if we have to, until we actually get something that we can live with. And I think that our community in supports that development. It's opening very soon. It has many features that
never had like the first affordable housing built in our community in 35 years. Like an assisted living facility, so that people who want to stay in our community as they age actually have a place to live. And apartments so that young professionals can repopulate our city, our area, because actually they didn't need it. So in the end, I think an example of good development on our ward was Children's. An example of bad development was Webster Square. Because those of us who opposed it knew that having retail at that corner would not be successful. And it hasn't been. And so it would be great if we try again to reconvert that to some kind of residential use.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Alderman Smith.
Sure.
Still on development, zoning, and land use. Many residents believe the 43rd Ward has too many teardowns which destroy the unique architectural character of Lincoln Park. One very recent example, was the demolition of the 19th century Italian row houses at 910 and 912 West Webster. Can you give us examples of development in the 43rd Ward that represent, oh, I'm sorry, there's a repetition here. I think the question is, can you give us, help me with this, the order? Yes, can you give us, so we're looking for aldermanic approval on any time there's a demolition within the board to prevent these kind of properties, from at least have to review, and then reviewing Orange, the resident community for it, yes.
So our ward has one of the heaviest population of landmark districts of any part of the city, and we very vigorously defend them. There's a house propped out on Sedgwick Street who tried to tear it down, and we went to court to stop it. But landmarking is something that requires community support. And this community, particularly the Sheffield Neighborhood Association area, not the association, the area, strongly opposed landmarking about 10 years ago. And we have actually visited with neighbors and asked, would you like to landmark your areas? And it requires 50% support, and we can never get it. But let me tell you what we do and what we have done. There are several places on Bissell and Magnolia in particular, in which beautiful orange-rated buildings were going to be torn down. And we negotiated with those developers and said, if you will keep this building, which is not what they wanted to do, we will let you build something a little bit bigger on the adjoining lot that you have torn down on not very good building. And we made that trade on Bissell Street and Ranch Triangle and in Wrightwood Neighbors. And so we've tried to take a pragmatic approach to preserving our beautiful old buildings. The market very aggressively wants to tear these treasures down, and I agree.
Thank you. Derek, same question?
So I don't agree all the time with the market wanting to tear the treasures down. I think it's one of those things where we need our community input, but beyond that, we need a landmarks commission that functions with actual architects on it. We have to make these decisions based on architectural heritage, what we're looking at, but also the development needs of the ward. I think listening to our folks is important, but I also think looking at what the architectural history of what we're looking at and how we protect it matters too. One of the things I think we've seen a lot of folks skirt our system by basically starting to tear something down and then going back and getting the funds to fix it. What we want to make sure is you have a process where everyone comes in the front door. Everyone works with the Landmarks Commission when they're in a landmark area. Everyone makes sure this actually gets real approval. And if someone violates that, they shouldn't be rewarded. And I think too often they are.
Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, we're moving on now to traffic, transportation, and congestion. This one will go to Derek. Traffic and transportation planning remains a serious concern in our community. What creative, innovative, and specific measures could we expect from your leadership in the coming years to manage our traffic and congestion problems across the board?
So I think it's a great question because it gets to what I hear so much when I knock on people's doors. What so many of you have said to me when we've been out in the community, which is I can't get anywhere, I'm stuck in traffic the whole time. People are trying to go by the Children's Memorial with all the construction, and frankly the traffic hasn't even moved in yet, on Fullerton, on Lincoln, on Halstead. They see what they're in for and they're stuck in it. People are worried about the development we have coming in, and this is why my primary concern with it is the congestion. I think if we don't plan for this, and we haven't planned well, we're going to be in real trouble. And you're going to spend more and more of your life, instead of at home with your loved ones, or having fun or at work, stuck in traffic. I give the classic example of the Cortland-Elston highway interchange, which is one of the worst worst highway interchanges in the world. I think what we need to do is we need to fix that. Let's make it a better highway interchange, just like they did on Fullerton and Damon and Elston. When they cleaned that up, it really helped with traffic. Let's also focus to make sure if we ever do something again with a big development in the ward, we're going to do it in a way that's not just going to dump a lot of traffic in the middle, but we're going to do real independent traffic studies. And I think for both Sterling Bay and Children's Memorial, we saw what happens when those traffic studies aren't released several months in advance and the community does not have the opportunity to have input, whether it was Sterling Bay or whether it was Alderman Smith and Children's Memorial.
Thank you. Alderman Smith.
So the restructuring of, I can never say it, Elston, Cortland, and Ashland is a really great idea, and it's already in plan. So I have yet to hear a really new plan. Let me tell you what we do. We have old streets, and we have new uses. So what we do every day is look around for ways that we can make it better. Now, the next time you drive at Larrabee, Geneva Terrace, and Webster, look at it. Because we pulled some parking back on Larrabee and Webster in order to create sort of fake turning lanes, because CDOT wouldn't let us build a real turning lane. We're doing it at Willow and Halsted as well. We changed light timing. We got new parking when over at the Green City Market. Remember, there used to be trucks all over the place, and we created new parking. When you live in an old community like ours, where we're not building freeways through our neighborhood, you actually have to try to really be real smart, work with the engineers, and try to make things work. The next place we're going to fix is the corner of Lincoln Park West, Clark, and Armitage. You know that horrible corner with that light? So we stopped that horrible water project in order to redesign that goofy intersection. Those are the kinds of things that we can do.
Thank you.
Every day.
Excellent. Thank you. Same topic, transportation, traffic and congestion. In a report released last month, this is for Alderman Smith, sorry. In a report released last month, Chicago was ranked third worst city in the nation for traffic congestion. Consistent with everything both of you have just been saying. Traffic is exacerbated by high density, poor public transportation, deteriorating infrastructure, and more cars on the road, including those rideshare vehicles. What have you done, or what would you do, or what would you propose, rather, for addressing traffic congestion and infrastructure improvements in the 43rd Ward, Alderman Smith?
So I think that we need to continue to try to encourage the elimination of cars. I have a car, I have a garage. Many of us rely on cars, but many of our new residents don't. So we strongly discourage new residents from having cars by eliminating their ability to get permit parking at Children's, at Duet, at whatever it's called, Elevate, at virtually every new apartment building that's built in our ward. We want people to use public transportation and not cars. Now, Uber and Lyft, and everybody uses them, has turned out to be a really mixed blessing. Because the fact is that the single largest contributor to our new congestion is the 60,000 drivers of Uber and Lyft. So this is a pretty new issue, and it's a pretty new problem. And I think what we will probably need to do is start to try to work with CTA, and this is a national problem, of trying to work out, is there a way where Uber Pool can somehow work in the future with buses? Because it's the buses at CTA that are really taking a beating. And we also have to really encourage, when we redo Lakeshore Drive, which is a huge project, that we have high-density bus lanes, so that people can be discouraged from driving downtown because they have a dedicated bus lane. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to be continuing to work on in the future.
Thank you very much. Eric?
So I think this is a real simple choice. If you think traffic and infrastructure is where you like it, and you think we're better off than we were 8 years ago with it, you should vote for Alderman Smith. If you're like me and you spend a lot of time sitting in traffic, even though you don't drive that often, and you think things are getting worse, particularly around the Children's Memorial development, I'd ask for your vote. I think if you look at what's happening with traffic and infrastructure in our ward, our streets are in worse shape, and we're having more problems getting around, and our transit isn't getting better. And you know, we keep talking about these things. City government needs to react more quickly. The idea that Uber and Lyft are so new is a problem from 5 or 6 years ago. The fact is we're getting into a situation where it's a new normal in transportation, and we have to adapt to it more quickly. And that means things like being thoughtful about where we build new developments, how we build them, what they look like, spreading out density better. And it also means things like making sure we get promises to build infrastructure and fix streets before something comes in and not after. There's a real chance to improve infrastructure in our neighborhoods. If you go to the Gold Coast, you'll see plenty of paved streets. But if you go up here, you see plenty of potholes. And that's something I'm going to fix on year 1. Thank you.
I need to respond to this because.
No, I
Wait,
wouldn't.
wait, wait, no,
Okay,
sorry,
keep it.
sorry, you can have that during your statement time. It's fine.
Okay, sure.
We have a lot of questions.
Thanks.
No, I appreciate that, though. We're gonna move on to taxes. This is for Derek. Property taxes are reaching levels that are driving people out of our community. Is there any way to help residents, and what specifically, what ways, who are about to be priced out of their homes by the most recent tax increases? How can they be helped?
Yeah, and this is one of the biggest things we've talked about in this campaign. We're having a serious problem with property tax in our community where it's devastating 2 different groups in our community. We're having less and less young families be able to live here. Families like mine that can barely afford to live here in the first place and start to get pushed out because of the property taxes. And then we have more and more seniors, folks who have been anchors in this community for decades, who suddenly can't afford to live in the neighborhood where all their friends and family are, where they've called home for decades. We can't do that. We have to be thoughtful about how we're doing this. Alderman Smith and I have a fundamental disagreement here. Alderman Smith came up 4 years ago and told you she would not raise your property taxes. 6 months later, she voted for the biggest property tax increase in city history. She's going to claim it's all because she was forced to by state law. And you know what? It's just not true. The state law at the time was SB 3538, and it said you only had to raise property taxes if you didn't reduce government spending or come up with other sources of revenue. Our problem isn't that we were forced to raise property taxes. Our problem is our aldermen and city council weren't creative enough to think of any other solution.
Thank you. Alderman Smith?
So, well, there's a whole lot of things that I need to answer. First of all, I guess my opponent really doesn't want to tell you what actually I've said. I would not consider any property tax increase until every single possible alternative has been exhausted, which is what I said in 2015. And in 2016, after Derek got his well-trumpeted property tax pension reform, the very people that he negotiated turned around and sued. I guess he didn't get a promise not to sue in his legal agreement. The Illinois Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional, and SB 3538 says, if pensions are not fully funded, or on the path to fully funded, by mid-2016, you must raise property taxes to fill the gap for the police and fire pensions, or the state will withhold your funding. And go ahead and look it up, 3538. And the result of that was that faced with that failure to make sure that the unions wouldn't sue us, the city had to act. And we did raise revenue from other sources. We raised it for municipal and laborers from a phone tax and water rates. But the state law said property taxes for police and fire, and 100% of that increase was because of that. And that is the law. Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you have a quick response there?
No. Sorry. Pensions and city deficit burdens, we're 10 minutes behind, sorry, so we have to keep moving. Alderman Smith, this is for you on pensions, and there will be other opportunities on tax, I believe, so.
Sure.
City pensions are still massively underfunded.
Yes.
Given the long time frame it would take to start collecting revenue from what we've heard in past debates, such things as marijuana and gambling proposals, what alternative methods would you support to raise the revenue to pay off these long overdue pension obligations, Alderman Smith?
Well, this is going to be a very, very joint effort of the state. And I talked to my constituents. I've talked to you after Mayor Emanuel made a speech about pension reform. First of all, I strongly support a constitutional amendment in order to reduce cost of living increases, which are the single biggest driver to pensions. Secondly, I support, because our constituency supports, the legalization of marijuana and taxing it, as well as reluctantly a casino. There are other taxes that can be considered, like taxes on revenue, but for right now, those are our sources right now, and I have taken a very deep pledge that I will not vote for a property tax increase.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, we're
So
not-
I think this is actually one of the key differences, one of the things I'm really glad we're going to talk about. Alderman Smith, you're going to hear her criticize my pension plan a lot. What she's referring to is when I was a staffer, I took the risk of negotiating a pension plan that got 28 out of 31 city unions. The Chicago Tribune, Crane Chicago, Chicago Sun-Times editorial board, and most of the business community behind it. We made real progress, but the Illinois Supreme Court said a lot of it couldn't go through. It was the first time we actually came together and did something about pensions. And you heard Alderman Smith herself right now tell you she decided to take action on this important issue to ask you what you thought this fall, 2018, over 7 years after she was first elected. This is the biggest issue we face. This is driving up our property taxes. This is pushing people out of our community. It's not something you can do 7 years of nothing on and then hope someone else has the answer. When I was a staffer, I attacked this issue with everything I have. No one wants to work on this issue. It's hard. It's unpleasant. There's no easy answers. But I went after it because I knew it mattered for our community. I didn't wait on the sidelines for 7 years and then conduct a poll to tell me what to do. If we don't make tough choices around our pensions, around collapsing layers of government so we don't have so many different governments, but we're more efficient for the taxpayer, and then looking at alternative revenue sources like marijuana, like gaming, but also things like starting to tax aldermanic pension clerks that double their pensions, we're going to be lost at sea. The time for action was 8 years ago. It's not just thinking of it now.
Okay, thank you. Glad you got an example in there at the end. Crime and safety for Derek. As indicated in our recent survey, crime in our ward remains a concern. The root causes are controversial and solutions remain divisive. What would you say is the best strategy to improve safety beyond what we have currently going in the 43rd Ward?
So I'm glad we got to safety here because I got to tell you, it's the #1 thing I hear about when I knock on people's doors. They talk about it a lot and they're worried. And the reason they're worried is we've seen a drastic increase in crime in our ward. 73% more assaults than since the last election. We've seen sex offenses up over half, and we've seen motor vehicle theft up over 2/3. People are scared, and they have a right to be. We deserve a safe neighborhood, and we deserve a safe city for everyone. So here's what I think you do. #1, we need to reestablish deterrence. We need to catch people who are committing crimes. That starts by reinvesting in our detective bureau. Right now, the city of Chicago sells 17 to 18% of murders. The national average is 64%. We can do better. We can train our detectives better. We can invest in having more detectives. And we can make sure we're using the latest technology so we're not solving crimes that have evidence on social media with flip phones. Right now, we're one of the few places that until just over a year ago, you could go through an entire police career with no additional training. So let's stop that right there. Let's double down on training. Let's reinvest in our detectives. Let's also get at the root causes of crime. And for me, that means things like minimum wage and mental health. It means not voting against a minimum wage increase that gives people alternatives to crime, like Alderman Smith did, or voting to close half the city's mental health centers, and which Sheriff Tom Dart has told led to a problem spike in his jail population. We can be thoughtful about better policing, giving our police the training and equipment they need, and at the same time addressing the root causes of crime.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, I think that this also demonstrates a lack of understanding. I don't think that the people who are getting mental health treatment today at the clinics that replace those places are the people who commit crimes in our community. The people who commit crimes in our community are repeat offenders and professional criminals, virtually every time. And I know that because I have a close working relationship with the police. Crime is our #1 priority. And once again, not one thing that my opponent has said is new, it's all in process. We've gotten more police, we've gotten more high tech, we've recovered from all the retirements and have 1,000 more than 1,000 new police officers in Chicago than there were after 2014. The detective ranks are up, they are being trained, and arrests are up in our community, 55% for gun cases. At our recent CAPS meetings, robberies are in fact down in the 19th district at their lowest level in 5 years, take to aggressive action by the police. And the 18th district is increasing. We had a recent spike in Old Town, and the police are vigorously responding. These are things that we work with every day and work with our police. And we also forged a new agreement with our state's attorney to really to focus on those repeat offenders. many of whom were let go on the streets because of the state's attorney's new policies. And we have gone back to her and gotten that fixed. I believe that we have turned the corner.
Thank you. Let's move on to education and schools, another very hot topic of concern. For Alderman Smith, according to Principal Armendariz from Lincoln Elementary School, the school is again close to reaching overcrowded status after a controversial $30 million annex was added less than 5 years ago. In Oscar Mayer Magnet School, the recent Office of Inspector General Performance Review is now requiring the school to increase capacity for families outside the ward to come in, which will continue to push the crowded classrooms towards capacity. Will you commit tonight to a comprehensive ward-wide school plan to solve student distribution problems within our community schools?
So I have been working on a comprehensive school plan for 7 years. And the fact is that Mr. Armendariz is a little worried, but there is no reason to worry. When we plan Children's Memorial, we plan for that capacity. We plan for the number of families to come in, and we did a demographic study, not the school district did, but our parents, who some were experienced demographers, actually predicted the exact number of students who are at Lincoln Elementary right now. So we are well on path, and I am very proud of that annex at Lincoln Elementary, because many of the young families who are in our city are going there. They don't call it controversial, they call it home. We're now experiencing some issues at Oscar Mayer, in which the school district discovered that there has been essentially too many neighborhood kids at that magnet school. And so that school area has been working very, very well together to get that fixed. And we also know that in a few years, because of Lincoln Yards, we are going to have a problem. And so now we're planning for it now. I'm really proud of what we've done for our schools. We've had more investment in Lincoln Park schools in the last 7 years than we have had in the previous 40. $60 million, including making Lincoln Park High School, putting Lincoln Park High School on its way to being an option to every kid in our school. And I tell you, I will not say to the young moms and dads who came to Lincoln Elementary that they were wrong for wanting to go there. I just will not say that.
Okay. Derek.
So I think this is a really good kind of case study with a different approach. I think the first thing you have to do as an alderman, you have to listen. And I think when you have a great principal, like the principal we're talking about here, who's led a great school turnaround, you don't want to blithely dismiss his concerns as, don't worry about it, I got it. We have serious concerns with overcrowding. I know because my own son is we're trying to get in the lottery for the 3-year-old program next year at Oscar Mayer. And there's a limited amount of spaces. And they're working on solutions that are not easy. But we have wonderful parents and wonderful principals who are working hard on these issues. You know, this is something that came out of a lot of other debates. And I think the key to these issues is supporting those parents and principals. It's why I've said I'll donate part of my aldermanic salary to the schools every year. It's why I'm so personally invested in supporting in our schools. It's why we have to think of what we can do to add to our schools. And that includes things like adding social workers and making sure we have computer curriculums so we're advancing into the next age. What I don't think we should do is dismiss concerns of principals. We have wonderful principals in this board. We have great active LSDs, the local school councils. And I think the role of the alderman should be to be their champion. It should be the person who's fighting for them in CPS, who they feel like they can text or call at 11 o'clock at night and say, we have a problem, we need to fix it. That's why I have the relationships I do, that's why I have the supporters who I do among our LSCs, and I'm very excited to work with them as the next alderman.
Thank you. Thank you both. Same topic, and Alderman Smith, I think you just brought this up, but this will start with Derek. Will you commit to utilizing all low-cost CPS recommended solutions before adding school capacity in this very tight and overtaxed ward? Given the additional student population coming from Lincoln Yards, what would be an appropriate request from Alderman Hopkins and Sterling Bay in this regard?
So I'm going to answer the second part first and the first part second. I think when you ask what we need from Lincoln Yards, the fact is we either need a new school or an actual plan to handle the capacity. There was some talk of the possibility of a new school, and I think it's something we should insist on as part of any development agreement we make with them in the future. It was not prioritized. The priority was a park, it was not a school, and it was not transportation. And I think we have to have a plans for a new school, or plans of what we're going to do with all those additional families and children. For me personally, I think new school is probably the best option. The first question you asked, I think, is important, which is, will you commit to whatever solution CPS has with the central office? And I think the answer is actually no. I won't. I'm going to listen to the parents. I'm going to listen to the principals. I'm going to listen to the folks who have invested so much blood, sweat, and tears in building our schools up into what they have today. And I'm going to be their advocate. If they tell me the CPS solution is a good solution, I'm going to fight for it. If they tell me it's a bad solution that's hurting our schools, I'm going to fight against it. I don't think you can commit to a central office solution. What makes our neighborhood schools great isn't downtown. It's the folks in this community. It's the parents and principals doing the work every day, raising the money, going in, giving extra time, giving extra effort. And frankly, we have some wonderful principals here too. And I think that should be our number one goal.
Thank you, Alderman Smith.
I've been supporting our principals for 7 years, and I have wonderful relationships with each and every one of them. We talk whenever they need my help, and we talk when we visit. And I think that a school at the Lincoln Yard site or close nearby is absolutely a priority and always has been one. Now, there's no land in the 43rd Ward for a new school, so there's no doubt that we have to negotiate for that. And CPS, in doing the Oscar Mayer work that they're doing, has acknowledged that there weren't seats for our people. The reason they rejected splitting up the school now or doing something different is because we actually knew that the schools that are immediately around Oscar Mayer are not up to the quality of Oscar Mayer. So we work with them very, very closely. And every single one of our schools has improved its performance and its facilities since I've become alderman. Now that's a record on which I am very proud because that's why I ran for alderman, is to become the education alderman, to fight for every child who comes to this school. And we'll get there. And we will get there not because of a big promise from someone who's never had to fight for a school, but from someone who has done it time and time again. And we'll keep doing it together.
Thank you. We're going to move on to ethics reform now. Hot topic. Citywide as well as locally here in the 43rd Ward. We're going to start with Alderman Smith. You both have endorsed Lori Lightfoot for mayor, citing her as a reform candidate who has pledged to change Chicago's corrupt politics. Given both of your ties to the previous administration and politics of the past, what are your top 2 priorities to reform city government? We want to hear 2.
Well, let me say this. I've been fighting for reform. I'm not sure about the premise of your question, because I've been fighting for reform for 7 years on behalf of this community. When I first came to office, there was no oversight of city council. There was no independent budget office. There was no investigation of city spending. And there was no oversight of aldermanic committees. I have fought for all of those things, and in fact led the vote to try to take jurisdiction over Ed Burke's Workers' Compensation Committee from him. Now we lost that vote by 2 votes. One of them was Joe Moore, who lost his job over it, and the other one was Ed Burke. And so now we have a chance. What's so fantastic and historic about this occasion is that now we have a chance to keep going with someone who, like me, started at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and who knows how hard it is to fight corruption, how hard it is to keep going. To not just say, oh, we're going to do this with a plan, but to actually get in there and run the votes and do the fights at a time when some of this was political suicide. In fact, just on the news the other day, it was revealed that Alderman Burke has been lending out staff. And that's a long rumored practice. And I was once told, if you want more staff in your office, go see Ed Burke. And I never did. And now we've passed the introducing a law to get rid of it, and it's getting exposed.
Thank you. Thank you, Derek. Same question.
So I think having a clear ethics reform plan is important. But I think standing up for ethics reform doesn't mean just doing it when it's popular like now. I think it means doing it when it was unpopular. For example, in 2014, there was a vote, should the Inspector General's office having jurisdiction over City Council? There was 42 aldermen who voted for it. There was 6 brave aldermen who voted to block it. There was 6 brave aldermen who voted to give that jurisdiction. And there was 2 aldermen who walked off the floor and didn't take the vote. Our alderman was one of those aldermen. We have to stand up for ethics reform when it's easy like it is now. We have to stand up when it's hard. You have to do 2 things, Jim, and I'm going to give you 2 things in which the alderman and I disagree. The first is side jobs. I think if you don't ban other aldermanic private income, you're going to be in a situation where there's a door to corruption to legally bribe any alderman. Our current alderman said she'd be a full-time alderman. She ran on that promise every time. But as soon as she got in, she started taking money from her biggest campaign contributor, who set up a foundation that paid her $288,000. I think you can't do that. I think if you say you're going to be a full-time alderman, you got to be a full-time alderman. You got to ban side jobs, not just for me, but for every alderman in City Council. And then I think you got to follow it up by putting in real term limits, so we don't have aldermen there 50 years to consolidate power and draw the districts they want and choose the voters who elect them like Ed Burke did.
Thank you. Okay. 2 more questions within the general category. The next question will be for Derek, and it's regarding ward night. 34 of the 50 wards in our city host some form of ward night. Would you agree here tonight to host a quarterly ward night or more frequent for your constituents, which would allow community residents to connect with you in your office? If not, please explain, because there might be reasons, but if yes, we as the neighborhood association would like to know if we could be involved as a co-host on a revolving basis. Derek?
So yes, and sure, I'd love to have you guys co-host. I think that'd be fabulous. I actually think we should do monthly ward nights. I think we should do office hours, so the alderman has slots where you can sign up and see the alderman, and then ward nights where you can talk to the alderman as a group together. Most aldermen do this. I'm not really sure why we don't. The fact is, you need an opportunity to tell me things I need to hear. And frankly, you need an opportunity, even when it's tough, even when you want to get mad at me because I screwed something up, to come and tell me that. And I should have to listen. That's what being your representative is all about. That's what being your alderman is all about. This is a position where you really work with your neighbors individually, one-on-one. And I think not having a ward night is one of the biggest problems we have in our city council and in our ward. There's so many aldermen who choose to do this, and we don't. Let's have that face-to-face contact. We can modernize the alderman's office behind the scenes, so when you call in, everything on our end is efficient. But on the other hand, we have to do the best of those old school traditions, where if you want to talk to me, you can, I'm available. Not having ward night, not having aldermanic office hours is something seriously missing in the 43rd Ward, and I can't wait to bring it back.
Thank you. Alderman Smith?
So we've been having word nights in our ward in decades, but if the community and the community associations with whom I meet every quarter for 7 years haven't asked me for it. But if this is a new request, we'll gladly put it in. We meet all the time. My evenings are usually spent meeting with constituent groups, meeting with condo associations, and meeting with your neighborhood organizations. All the time. If the community wants it, that's fine. The request hasn't been made until this campaign. And we've always been open and accessible. I think the people who are active in this community know that I'm very accessible day and night, and we have that. But I'm happy to have it. Any way that we can do increasing communication. When I started as alderman, we didn't even have an e-newsletter, except for a few, maybe 100 people. We now communicate with 25,000 people in our newsletter. I think the biggest or the second biggest distribution in the city of Chicago. And we're up on Facebook and Twitter and all methods of social media, now Nextdoor, which is a really wonderful communication device. You really can't communicate enough as alderman, and I'm out there every day, which is why well over 70% of the people in this community actually know who I am and have met me. So I'm really proud of that record, and we'll just always keep improving. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Last question in the general categories goes to Alderman Smith. According to the Environmental Law and Policy Center, the top environmental goals of Chicago are the need for good public transit, clean energy, and clean rivers and lakes.
Yes.
What have you done, or what would you propose to further
trying to manage stormwater in our ward, which is why I've taken a somewhat unpopular position against connectors, which is really not supported by the real estate industry. And that's because our houses have gotten bigger over time, and they're beautiful. But as they've gotten bigger, they've taken up more space. And it's leading to flooding all over our neighborhood. They call it urban flooding, which is not necessarily, it's sometimes in the street, because we keep water there from coming into your basement, but sometimes it's in your basement. So if you've ever had a basement flooding problem, this is really why it is. And so we've been focusing on that, hammer and tong, and trying to make sure when things are built, that there's adequate stormwater management and adequate green space. That's one of the reasons why we're actually pushing so hard for the North Branch Park. Because you know where that water goes into the Chicago River. And it's disgusting. Or sometimes it goes into our lake. Having the North Branch, the 24-acre public park, will actually serve as a huge water sink. Just like the Alcott Field of Dreams does, it actually was built in part by a stormwater management grant from the state of Illinois. That's why we put in Parjana, this new whiz-bang technology to help decrease flooding in our ward. So those are one of the things we really had a real focus on that. But we also are in favor of, we do build some transit-oriented development to try to stop cars. So we've been working on it, and also we've had even solar panel workshops in order to try and encourage that.
Thank you. Derek.
So Chicago actually used to be one of the original environmental city leaders. At the very beginning of kind of this millennium, we were actually really getting into making a real leadership role in climate change. Early on, we were making real progress with things like green building codes and being thoughtful about how we build and the emissions that our buildings let off. And you know, one of the problems is we kind of gave up that legacy. There's so much more we can do with climate change. We can be the city that leads on this issue. We can be the neighborhood that leads on this issue. We can do the small things, like making sure we're using permeable materials when we build, where we can show that that stormwater issue soaks into the ground and goes through the permeable materials. But we can also do the big things. We can revamp how we do buildings in this city so they don't let off so much heat and electricity and force us to use more and more carbon. We used to be a leader on this issue. Let's be a leader again. Let's revamp how we do buildings. Let's have a great green building code. Let's be thoughtful about our big buildings. And when we have our homes, let's look into things like getting incentives for solar panel roofs. So folks in our community can not only help the environment, but save on their own electric bill. This doesn't just mean a workshop thrown in at the end once. This means looking into real incentives and real building codes that make it easy for companies to come in and just put up your solar roof like that. Let's make it that easy. Let's make it that fast, because I think we're going to need to in the next century as we slowly have more and more climate change attack our city and attack our country and the world.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to move into the lightning round, which is yes or no answers. Quick, trying to change the pace up a little bit, give you guys a break. So all you have to do is say yes or no. If for some reason, we don't anticipate this, but if for some reason you need to elaborate, you have up to 15 seconds, however we'd like you to keep it to yes or no. So let's go. We're going to start with Derek on this. And for this one, let's try to keep it to a yes or no. Do you support the current Lincoln Yards plan?
No, I don't think it deals with transportation infrastructure issues enough, and I think we need more park and school communities.
Okay, and Michelle?
No, this is the first time we've ever heard his position.
Okay.
Literally, look it up.
Okay. Going back to Michelle, question number 2. Would you vote against the Lincoln Yards TIF in its current form and if the issue came before you in the city council?
I would vote no.
Okay. And Derek?
I would vote no. We don't even know what's in it yet. We need to know a lot more about this before we consider approving it.
Okay, thanks. Derek, to you, question number 3. We have a total of 6 if I didn't say that. So you have both come out in support of Lori Lightfoot for mayor. She has stated that the city council should have delayed approval of the Lincoln Yards development and police and fire training academy until the next term, and should not have moved one step forward without an explanation of the effects on population density, schools, traffic, and other factors. And do you agree with this statement, starting with Derek?
So I would say, yes, I agree with it for the Lincoln Yards, because I think Lori was very clear on the need for infrastructure in that statement. On the police academy, I think the approval could happen now or could happen later. Either way, that will get approved.
So you would support,
I would be fine with waiting on voting on the police academy. I would be fine with voting on it now.
all right, and Alderman Smith?
So I do think that the police academy, I did support the police academy and voted for it. Because I think that training was required. Now, Lincoln Yards, I think everyone
Yes
knows
or no,
that
please?
position.
So do you agree?
I voted for it, so I certainly did not agree. But I agree on of course, on Lincoln Yards, everyone knows my position
Yes,
there.
okay. Thank you. I'm sorry to make it short, but we're trying to
Mhm.
shake it up a bit here. Okay, so back to Alderman Smith, question 4. Would you support ongoing independent traffic studies for the 43rd Ward specifically?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The city hasn't even studied the intersections we care about, which is Clybourne, Sheffield, and Willow, and
Okay.
Clybourne, Armitage, and Racine.
All right, thank you. And Derek?
Yes, I support them being released months in advance so the neighborhood associations have opportunity to review them for Lincoln Yards, and I would have supported the same thing for Children's Memorial if I was older than them.
So a 10-second response, I'd like to ask, how would we pay for that? Alderman Smith, since you both agree on it.
How to pay for it?
Where would funds come for that?
Well, for one thing, the city has funds
Okay.
for it. You know, before Children's was done, there was actually an independent study done of what uses.
So
we
we would
thought
have-
about that, we participated in, the city paid for it, the city can pay for it
You're
again.
confident there would be annual money?
Excuse me?
You're confident there would be money available annually for that traffic study?
Annually?
Yeah, annual traffic study.
Oh, annual traffic study, I don't know that, I didn't even hear that.
Well, ongoing, so.
No, ongoing, for Lincoln Yards, yes, there absolutely needs to be an independent traffic
And
study.
Derek?
I think we already have developers paying for a lot of traffic studies. Let's force the developers to pay for independent traffic studies.
Thank you. Okay, back to Derek on question 5. Do you support increasing the number of orange-rated buildings in the ward?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you support increasing the number of orange-rated buildings in the ward? Orange-rated.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to before.
Preserve.
Oh, gotcha, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about climate emissions, like
No,
gold
yeah.
lead standard. I was like, I've heard platinum, I've never heard orange. I think we can be thoughtful and slowly expand our landmark destination. I think we want to do it with real-life architecture and not an eye to NIMBYism. I think if we're going to preserve architectural landmarks, let's make sure they're great architectural landmarks, and that starts with having real architects involved.
Thank you. Alderman Smith?
Oh.
You touched on this, but if you can.
Yeah, yes, I support redoing the property study that was done in 1991, that first laid out orange-rated buildings. We're actually doing something like this in Old Town, where we are seeking to expand the definition of the historic district to include some of the mid-century buildings. I think that's really important work to keep looking at.
Thank you. Okay, back to you, Alderman Smith. Last question. Would you change the tax incentives that favor keeping commercial properties vacant?
Absolutely, and Fritz Kagi has the bill in the Illinois House right now. It's already passed the Senate, and we have to get it through the House. The law is on its way if we can get it through the Illinois House.
And Derek?
Yes, and I wouldn't wait to year 8 of my aldermanic term to do it.
We had to wait till Fritz Kagi.
Okay.
We did it.
All right, okay. All
Awesome.
right. Okay, good to see you both agree on that. That's softball. We need that softball on this for you guys to agree. Okay, so individual questions now. So in this category, or in this round, each candidate will receive 3 individual questions. There'll be 2 specific questions of each candidate, and there'll be 1 question related to one of their mailers that they've sent out. And they'll have 90 seconds only to respond, no rebuttals in this round. So 90 seconds to respond, and we're going to start with Derek for the first question. Developers and companies close to developers have contributed to your campaign. Have you ever met with Sterling Bay or taken contributions from companies in any way affiliated with Sterling Bay to solicit donations and support? And how do you prevent them from having preferred access to your office?
So I have deliberately not taken contributions from Sterling Bay. I have never solicited a contribution from Sterling Bay. I have met with Sterling Bay when I was asked them to brief me on the plan because I wanted to understand what this really looked like. I think one of the biggest problems we have is we have an alderman who's taking contributions from developers, including the developer of Children's Memorial, including some of the biggest developers like Fifield and others in our city. I think when you do that while there's a development ongoing, you run into real trouble. Look, I can't say here that there's not some old friend of mine that can be somehow linked to someone who's not a developer or some developer. But one of the things I've made a point of pride is not taking contributions from Sterling Bay or from the Children's Memorial developer. I've also said, look, if there is a situation where it's someone I know or a conflict of interest, we should have a board of neighborhood leaders who are involved. We have to make an official recommendation. People from our neighborhood associations who have experience in planning. And I think one of the biggest problems is candidate Michelle Smith promised a very similar thing, but never followed through. And I think when that happens, you see developers like the Children's Memorial developer who will give donations to get their way without a check on it.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Alderman Smith.
Well, it's completely untrue, a lot of what Derek is saying. First of
We're
all,
alternating. I'm sorry, you know what? I thought we were in last four. I'm sorry, we're alternating, so we're going to move on to a different question for you.
yeah, I'm happy to respond.
I
I'm happy to respond.
know you are. I know
Yeah,
you
thanks.
are. My apologies. So, to Alderman Smith,
Yeah.
at the debate held at Lincoln Park High School, you stated that you were against term limits because of the deep institutional knowledge against prolonged experience on the job. And then you criticized police assigned to a specific beat because the cops who are around the longest tend to be the ones who become most corrupt. Why is that for an alderman, long service is good because of the institutional knowledge gained, but for a beat cop, long service is bad because they are now up at high risk for corruption?
I don't think that's exactly a fair characterization of the question.
Well, that
What I
came
did
from
say-
our online polls.
What I did say, what I do believe is that when you have very short term limits, like 1 or 2, you actually turn power over to the lobbyists who who prowl the floors of city council and they will have some institutional knowledge. Police officers are required to rotate the same way a bank teller is required to vote. Right? You know that bank tellers can never be on the same job forever. They have to take vacations in order to investigate. And that was the basis for that conversation. Of course we want police officers with knowledge. Of course we do. And we have many of them who've worked on the job for 20 years or more. I don't think it's really always about the length of service. It's really about what kind of people you elect. But I tell you, Derek and I both agree on one thing. A third term is a really good thing. And so I'm looking forward to serve you in my third term.
Thank you. All right, we'll go back to Derek for this question, specific to you. Our candidate, Rebecca Janowitz, stated that there are 2 newcomers running for alderman in the 43rd Ward. And this is a quote. She said, "I am one of them, and Derek needed to live in the ward to run against the only incumbent alderman who had been twice forced into a runoff," unquote. Was this why you moved into the 43rd Ward, and how can you adequately represent this particular ward with so little experience in this community?
So I'm actually really glad this came up. For any of you who know my family and know me, the idea that I would move somewhere to run for office, especially from an open seat, to run against an incumbent, to put my kid in school, to spend all our savings buying a house is preposterous. I actually was in this ward for many years. This is the ward I lived in when I met my wife. This is the ward we had our first apartment together in. I moved back because I wanted to raise my family here. I think it's really easy to negative Baylor to pretend I just moved in 4 years ago and ignore all the years we spent living here. Because it's easy not to tell the truth. Because people are hoping, people who may be on stage with me, that you don't ever have an opportunity to talk to me about it. They're hoping you don't ever have an opportunity to hear my wife and I, how we met story. They're hoping you don't know that I lived on the 1100 block of Westmoreland, or all the years she spent on Clark and Fullerton, or how we went on our 3rd date to Cafe Gay House and closed down the place we were talking so much. They want to pretend I don't have a connection because I couldn't afford a house here right away. And you know what? I couldn't. Like a lot of young families, we had to move somewhere cheaper, and we had to save for a down payment. And then as soon as we could afford it, we moved back, and we bought our first home here. I love our house. It's not the biggest house in the ward. In fact, it's one of the smallest. But it's a wonderful place to raise my family, and I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. Okay, Alderman Smith, direct to you. While claiming to be a strong supporter of ethics reform for City Council, how do you justify the committee vote, which was touched on earlier, on March 15th of 2015 to abolish the office of the Inspector General, then held by Fasal Khan, and explain your proposed ordinance requiring complaints against aldermen be made in sworn complaints, whereas complaints against all other city employees may be made anonymously? Would you comment, please? 90 seconds.
So I voted against Faisal Khan taking office because the office was a fraud perpetuated by Dick Grinnell. And anyone who's lived in this community for a long time, and the press at that time, all praised that vote. They absolutely knew that the Legislative Inspector General, which was created to oppose real reform, was a fake and a fraud. And I stood proudly at my first or second meeting of City Council and said, this is a fraud. Because the Legislative Inspector General was given virtually no powers over City Council. And we fought until we got a real Inspector General, Joe Ferguson. So I was very proud that Faisal Khan, he was an ineffective Inspector General, and the old guard all supported him. Look who voted. Dick Mell, who's gone, Pat O'Connor, Burke, Gary Austin. We had to embarrass City Council. And I had to run a vote, literally have the votes on a sheet to get 26 votes for reform, and as I've said, to get Inspector General support over City Council, and we won in committee. We ran the Rule 41, it's called the Force It On Committee, and got there. And at the last minute we lost, and you all know that's exactly what happened.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for that category. We're moving on to our, sorry, one more question within that category. It's the advertisings that we've all received. We're going to start with Derek. A question regarding Alderman Smith's ads criticizing you by charging that, quote, nearly 2/3 of your campaign cash over $300,000 has come from interests outside our ward, and that you just moved into the ward after the last alderman election to run for alderman with big campaign cash from Bain leadership and developers. I think I have it here somewhere. So, with the massive Lincoln Yards development looming, how can we trust that you will not side with big developers and big donors with the interests of 43rd Ward residents?
So I'm really glad we get to talk about this stuff because it's really fun to correct the record. There's a mailer you might have gotten that says I've taken over $300,000 in campaign cash outside the ward. It helps if you use people's business addresses, not their home addresses in the 43rd Ward. But it also helps to know that my opponent, Alderman Smith, has actually taken over $400,000 in campaign cash outside the 43rd Ward this election. In fact, in the first election in 2011, Alderman Smith took over $350,000 from one person who doesn't even live in the city, much less the ward. We've had a lot of stuff thrown at me, and you're going to see stuff thrown at me, because that's how you defeat change. You try to smear it. You try to make fun of it. You try to put it down. You try to say, this is wrong with it, this is bad with it. Some of you may have seen all the mailers that attacked me because me and Mitt Romney are buddies. Yeah, it's true. He worked at a consulting firm I worked at. He stopped in 1984. I was 3. I don't really remember him, maybe we knew each other, but this is what it is. It's powerful, and they'll pay tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But just remember that. Every time you see one of those mailers, think of me, 3 years old, sitting on Mitt Romney's lap, planning the destruction of the 43rd Ward.
Thank you. Other applause, please. Okay, Alderman Smith. Another ad of, I believe this is it. Anyways, you've seen the ads. Eric Lindblom's ads criticized you by charging that in March, quote, Alderman Smith told us that she opposed a property tax increase, but in October 2015, she voted for the largest property tax hike in Chicago history. Now, quote, Smith is promising to oppose a tax hike, but why should we ever believe Alderman Michelle Smith again, unquote? How can we trust your promise to not raise our taxes again?
So I think I already responded to that, right?
You did.
We talked about it. So I will talk about, though, what we just talked about, which is campaign contributions and why you need to be careful about, frankly, the mud that my colleague over there is throwing. Issues that have been litigated and relitigated in our ward in about 3 elections now, and we've been through it again. So I'm going to repeat again what I've said and presented the facts to Mr. Lindblom. First of all, as far as my campaign contributions, I have a dear friend. We'll talk about it. I have a dear friend whose family has lived in the Chicago area since the Civil War. She's passionate about what happens in our city and supported me as a reformer when I first ran in 2006 or 7 and then 11. She and her husband have been like parents to me, and that's the entire story. What's relevant is funding in this election cycle. something that Mr. Lindblom doesn't want to discuss. For one, he got $10,000 from Sterling Bay's lead attorneys, a company called Tarpey Wicks.
You will have a chance to have direct questions, so I'm gonna stop there, please.
Well, wait a minute, I can
Well, because the question was on taxes, it doesn't allow you to
No,
have
the
time.
question was on my campaign literature.
The premise of opposing the tax side, we thought we wouldn't want to.
Well, we've already talked.
Since you've already responded,
Yeah.
we're gonna stop it there. You will have a directive question, unless you want to expand on the tax question, which it sounds like you don't. You got about, I'd say 30 seconds left if you want to expand on that tax question.
Well, what's really at stake here is that our entire community is being reviewed right now. And the biggest tax decision that we have to face right now is that TIF. And my opponent, who is supported by, at least we found one big $10,000 contribution from Sterling Bay's lawyer, is selling us now, after being on the campaign trail this long, now he is saying he supports it, he's against it. Where have you been, Derek?
Okay. This actually segues in to the challenge questions, where you actually will get a chance now to ask each candidate specifically your questions, so you can bring up that information you just wanted, additional information if there's more to share. So the way this is going to work is we're going to have a 15-second question from each candidate, starting with Derek. The respondent will have 90 seconds to answer, and then the sending candidate, the person who asked the question, will have 45 seconds to rebut. Okay, so it's 15 seconds to ask, 90 seconds to answer, then 45-second rebuttal. We're going to start with Derek with your first challenge question for Alderman Smith. Go ahead.
Sure, I'm actually going to go back to Jim's question that wasn't answered, which is on the 2014 vote on Inspector General powers back when ethics was less popular. You were one of the 2 aldermen to walk off the floor and refuse to take the vote. Why?
Well, as I explained at the time, and I'll just repeat it again, I got a phone call, and I fell off the floor and missed the vote, and it was incredibly embarrassing. But let me say this, so you know. It did count then, and it counts now. And the fact is that every single vote that I have taken in City Council has been for reform, including what we have now. What that vote was actually about was whether or not, I think it was whether the Inspector General should have the authority to investigate campaign violations or something like that. The same violations that the Illinois Board of Elections has power. Well, he has power to do it now.
Okay, so
I think I get my response now?
yes, 45 seconds.
So I think this is really important, because I think there's a lot of folks in City Council who think you're dumb. And they want to trick you. They don't want to vote yes, and they want to vote no. They don't want to have to deal with angry Ed Burke, so they walk off the floor. If you think the reason that one of the few missed votes in that term was because there was something that happened just when the vote against Ed Burke needed to happen, I think you're a little gullible. I think it's easy to walk off the floor in a tough vote. I think it's easy to duck the tough questions. I think on that ethics vote, when it was unpopular, you saw 6 aldermen take a stand. I think in the future we need 7, we need 8, we need 25, we need 26. And I'm hopeful we'll get there, but we need change to make that happen.
Thank you. Okay, Alderman Smith.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Since I've taken office, I've refused every pay raise offered me as a 43rd Ward Alderman as a way to conserve taxpayer dollars. Please explain to these taxpayers how you accepted a $73,000 a year city government job, and then on day one, in clear violation of city budget rules, you got a pay raise to $125,000.
So I'm really glad this came up, because this is almost better than 3-year-old Derek on Mitt Romney's knee. I actually accepted, and I'll tell you exactly how much it was, a $125,000 a year job. It was a pay cut from where I was, but I wanted to serve the city. So I came in, and I had the exact same salary on day one I did the day I left. And I actually brought my pay stubs, because this keeps coming up. I have them right here if anyone wants to look at them. And the fact is, we had the exact same salary. There's some paranoid idea here that because the daily administration had a certain setup at the mayor's office with a lot of secretarial staff, and then manual administration said, we want to use this money differently, and saved $500,000 in the process, that somehow I did something crazy wrong. I had the same salary on day one that I did the last day. I'm happy to show anyone. And I can say this publicly. I was never involved in any sort of pay raise when I was at city council. In fact, when I was offered and I was spelled out, did I need a pay raise, I declined. I said I was fine, because I was doing it for public service. I was doing it because I thought I could make a difference. And I think one of the problems we have in the city is the old guard likes to attack people who come in and make change. And they come up with this specious, crazy stuff. Be it a 3-year-old out on his knee or something about a pay raise when your pay was the same the whole time. I was offered the same pay I took, which was the same pay I always took. I declined when I was spelled out for a pay raise every time. I did it because I love public service and because I thought I could make a difference in my hometown.
Thank you. Alderman Smith, 45 seconds.
Well, I'd say that the old guard here is really represented not by me, but by an alderman who says he doesn't accept contributions from developers, but does, who says that he's against a development that he's never taken a stand on his entire time living here. That's what I have to say about that. And so I'm not sure, I appreciate your salary was the same as it was on day one. Here's what I know about my salary. I have, every time a raise has been offered to me, I've turned it down.
Thank you. Okay. We will go to Derek now, right? Derek, you'll have your next question.
Sure.
For Alderman Smith.
When we had a new committeeman in this board, they started what I thought was a great idea, which was a merit judicial evaluation panel for the first time. You asked to and served on that panel, and while you were serving on that panel, you took several campaign contributions from judges. Do you think that was ethical?
I really don't know about it. But I will say this, we've had a judicial evaluation panel, and for those of you who remember when I was committeeman, the number one thing that I cared about was whether or not we had the most outstanding judges that we could have. But when you were on that panel, Derek, you supported the endorsement of Robin Sheffman over Jamie Shapiro, who had the highest judicial ratings in our area for that race. And you decided to go along with sort of the machine-endorsed candidate, who was initially found completely unqualified. So I'll tell you what, those of you who know me when I was committeeman, I still put out that list, actually. I put out a list every year of the judges who I thought were the most qualified. And I've always believed that one of the primary roles of committeemen is to support the election of great judges. And I did that with great honor and great pride. And I was also proud to support Jamie Shapiro, who won, unfortunately, over the recommendation of your decision.
I'm sorry, you're talking about Robin Schaffner?
Yes.
So you can actually see Robin Schaffner's contribution to Alderman Smith on her website. Is it my turn yet?
Yeah, it's 45 seconds.
Thank you. You can see the contribution right here. You can also see the contribution from other judicial candidates.
Well, clearly
Like
you
Mike,
are.
I'm sorry. My turn. I was respectful during your turn. You can actually see the contribution from Michael Forty, who gave both before and after the judicial panel. I think this is exactly the problem we have. I did not support the judge you're talking about. I actually didn't. I think what's really key here is that if you serve on a judicial merit evaluation panel, you don't take 5 different campaign contributions from the judges who are going in front of that panel. That's the Ed Burke School of Judicial Nominations. It's what we've been trying to get rid of in the 43rd Ward, and the time's come for a real change.
Thank you. Alderman Smith. Question to Derek. 90-second response.
Yes. Mr. Lindblom, I've seen you at meetings.
Hello.
I've seen you at meetings on Lincoln Yard. You've never said a word. You've never written a guest editorial, never stood with your neighbors or stood up for a report. How do you swear taking money from the unions and the friends of the mayor who are pushing Lincoln Yards, particularly $10,000 from their lawyers? I would have respected you even if you had disagreed with me and supported wholeheartedly.
Okay.
But explain your silence, please.
So, Alderman, you took $10,000 from one of the construction unions just this morning. And I think the key on Lincoln Yards is one of the things I do is I listen. I know it's different, and I know it's something some of us might not be used to, but I try to listen before I talk. I attended those meetings and didn't say anything because I was listening. Many of you talked to me after the meetings when I came up to you and asked you further questions. How do you feel about this? How do you think this plan is evolving? Do you think it's getting better or worse? How would you think I should vote if I was an alderman? I think it's important to listen. We have amazing community leaders. But I think the best role of a leader isn't to insist it's your opinion above all others. I think it's to act as a catalyst who grows new leaders, who listens to our neighborhood associations, who fights for them when they're in negotiations, who has a seat at the table and negotiates. Instead of grandstanding, I think it's really important to listen. I listened, and I've said this vote many times. I said it at Ranch Triangle when we were together just a few days ago, and I think we can talk about that. And I've said it beforehand. But what I wanted to do is start by listening to my neighbors. It's not all about me. I want to be alderman because it's all about you.
Thank you. Alderman Smith, 45 seconds.
I think it's very convenient to say that you're listening. Our community, I've been listening to our community for 7 years and are following, working with our neighborhood organizations to determine what to do as well as our everyday citizens. And there is a hunger in this neighborhood to make sure that this development is done right, that we identify the lack of open space, schools, fix our transportation. And my job is to listen and then to fight. Not to sit on the sidelines and now when it's convenient, now finally say yes or no.
Thank you. Derek, question number 5. This is the 5th question of 6. So Derek to Alderman Smith.
Sure.
There were 2.
There's 2 more.
Alderman
You'll
Smith.
have 1 more. You'll each have 1 more.
Okay. Alderman Smith, in a recent forum at Ranch Triangle, you called General Iron a thorn in the side of the community for the last 100 years. Yet during your tenure as alderman, you've taken almost $65,000 in campaign contributions from them as they continue to be in violation of the Clean Air Act at different times. Do you think that was an ethical choice?
Well, that's not entirely accurate either, Derek. The fact is that until the PMD was reversed, it was not there were no means to actually shut down General Iron. I've called for the plant to be shut down and demanded that they move. I've demanded that the city be in eminent domain to get ownership of the property and turn it into a public park. They are moving, and in fact, on Friday, the ZBA, Zoning Board of Appeals, just passed the special use that will enable General Iron to move. This guarantees that they are in fact moving. I supported closing the driveway, called upon the EPA to move along in enforcement actions and to restrict operating hours. I've also asked the city to increase their inspection. Now it's time for them to go. And what we need to be focusing on now that we are past the PMD and the grudging tolerance that this community had to have it for them when they were protected by that PMD, to do what now? It's time for us, that's why over a year, we've been focusing on having a movement to demand that the property be bought by the city and create a buffer to development on the Chicago River, to create a solely needed public park and a public guarantee that our river will be accessible to everyone on the North Branch. This is the fight that's ahead of us, and what I've been working on, as so many of you in this room have been. We're going to win that fight.
Thank you. 45 seconds.
So I think it's pretty simple. I think there's a reason Alderman Smith talks about just getting active in this issue in the last year. It's because over $65,000 in contributions came into her account, her campaign account, and the 43rd Ward Dems when she controlled it account. I think you look at what she's doing, she's not fighting on this issue as hard as she could, and there's a reason. They are one of her most generous campaign contributors in her life. Look, we have to make real change. We have real environmental issues. These hurt our children, it's hurt seniors. Let's finally take action on this issue, and I will. And I've taken $0 from them, and I never will take any.
Thank you. Final question of the evening, and then we'll go to closing statements. Michelle Smith for Derek.
I'm happy to move on to my closing statement.
Okay, very good. All right, so why don't you start then, Alderman Smith? 2 minutes for your final statement, if you're ready.
I've lived in this entire community, my entire adult life. I came as a federal prosecutor, raised my family, stayed active in local groups, and served as your alderman for the last 8 years. I am well known to you. Everyone in this room knows that we are on the brink of great change. This campaign boils down to who will keep us moving ahead and who offers vague pronouncements, but has never actually fought in this community for change. I stood up to power and fought for reform before the bandwagon started. Instead of seeking favors from Ed Burke, I demanded oversight. It was considered political suicide at the time. And that's why our 32nd Ward Alderman, Scott Waxbeck, a reform leader, endorses me because we're partners in fighting for better government. Former Alderman Bill Singer and Marty Oberman, legendary reformers, endorse me too, and I support Lori Lightfoot, who stands for the change that we all need to make. A leader takes positions, makes hard choices, especially when the issues are tough. Most of us have an opinion about Lincoln Yards. Some of you agree with me, some of you don't. But the one person in this room who has just showed up and said yes or no today is the person who's asking for your vote. Has Mr. Lindblom run at this hard problem? No, he has run away. And now he knows he's accepted campaign contributions from their people. What we do know is that Mr. Lindblom met privately with Sterling Bay while disclosing nothing publicly about it. That sounds like doing business behind closed doors. We can get a public park. We can reduce the impact of Lincoln Yards. We can make sure our taxpayer dollars are spent wisely and not just on a developer, because we stood up and fought for it. You know me. You know that the slings and the mud that is now being spent on me is just the same old, same old. We can continue to curb crime and support businesses. We can get more out of your tax dollars while holding the line on taxes. The mayor realizes we've come a very long way, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Final statement?
Sure. Thanks for coming. I hope I get to talk to all you haven't talked to before. I want to be Alderman because I love this community. I love the city. It's where I'm raising my family. It's where my wife and I call home. We have a special neighborhood. This is a great place. There's a lot of work to do. We have some serious challenges with our finances. If you're happy with where your property taxes are versus where they were 4 years ago, I'd vote for Alderman Smith. If you're happy with the level of crime in this community versus 4 years ago, versus 8 years ago, I'd vote for Alderman Smith. We've had 8 years to make real change, and we haven't. It's been triangulation. It's been different choices here and there, walking off the floor for one vote, doing something else when it's popular. I'm here because I think we can build a better future together. I'm here because I want to listen to you. I'm here because I want to do the dorky small stuff. Like when you have a problem with your street light, figure out a system internally so we can tell you exactly how long it's going to take to get it fixed. So we can do something where you have an easy way to talk to me, to sign up for office hours or come to a ward meeting. I want to tackle the big problems too. I don't want to spend 7 years doing nothing on pensions and then poll you to ask you what to do. I want to take on the issue in day one. Because if we don't make a difference with our pension and debt load, we're going to be in real trouble with all of your taxes. We can go to the same old way of doing things and just keep raising your property taxes. We can have the ethics of the past, or we can do something new. We can vote for a change. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Sun-Times because I have the policy chops to make real reform, and because they love my TIF reform plan. I'm proud to be endorsed by folks like Carolyn Vickery from 2015, by our firefighters, by Vi Daly, by legendary reformer Dick Simpson, and we're about to announce a couple others. I'm proud because we're actually having the chance to make a real change. I love this community. I love the people in this community. It's why I serve on my neighborhood board. It's why I've been involved. And I can't wait to do more as your next alderman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, audience. Anytime now until April 2nd, I believe, is the final voting day. So thanks everyone for coming tonight, and appreciate it. Hopefully, give you information that can help make